In the heart of ancient Hyrule stands a structure that transcends mortal understanding, the Temple of Time, where sacred stones hold secrets older than memory itself. This is more than mere architecture. It is a nexus where destiny converges with divinity, where the flow of ages bends around purpose greater than any single lifetime. Within its hallowed chambers rest inscriptions that speak of eternal cycles, of heroes born from prophecy, and of darkness that returns like clockwork across the centuries. Tonight, we journey through millennia to uncover the hidden lore that transforms this temple from simple sanctuary into something far more profound. The eternal guardian of Hyrule's most sacred mysteries, watching over the endless dance between light and shadow. Before civilization carved its first mark upon the world, before the great kingdoms rose from wilderness and dream, the land that would become Hyrule existed in a state of primordial beauty. Rolling hills stretched endlessly beneath skies unmarked by the smoke of industry or the scars of war. Ancient forests whispered secrets to winds that had never carried the voices of mortals, and crystalline waters reflected stars that watched over a world still innocent of destiny's weight. Yet even in this untouched realm, forces beyond mortal comprehension were already at work, laying the foundations for something extraordinary. The goddess Hylia, divine protector of the Triforce and guardian of the mortal realm, understood that the peaceful age could not last forever. Her wisdom, born from eons of watching over creation itself, revealed the inevitable truth. Darkness would come, as it always did, seeking to claim what light had built. But Helia's response was not born of despair or resignation. Instead, she chose to prepare, to create structures and systems that would endure long after her own divine presence had faded from the world. Her influence began to shape not just the physical landscape, but the very understanding of sacred space itself. The concept of sacred geometry, unknown to the primitive peoples who would one day inhabit these lands, flowed through Hylia's divine consciousness like music made manifest. Every angle, every proportion, every placement of stone upon stone would serve a purpose that transcended mere aesthetic beauty. The temples she inspired would be more than places of worship. They would become conduits for power, channels through which divine energy could flow across the centuries. The positioning of these sacred sites followed patterns that mirrored the celestial movements above, creating a harmony between earth and sky that would resonate through the very fabric of reality. The goddess understood that time itself was not the linear progression that mortals perceived, but rather a great wheel, ever turning, bringing both light and darkness in their appointed seasons. This cyclical nature of existence would become the cornerstone of all sacred architecture in Hyrule, but nowhere would it be more perfectly embodied than in the structure that would one day be known as the Temple of Time. The location she chose for this most sacred of sites was no accident. It rested upon convergent lines of mystical energy that had flowed through the earth since the world's creation. The Triforce, that ultimate symbol of divine power comprising courage, wisdom, and power in perfect balance, would become more than just an artifact to be protected. Its very essence would be woven into the temple's design, its sacred geometry reflected in every arch and altar. The triangular motifs that would one day adorn the temple's walls were not mere decoration, but fundamental expressions of cosmic truth, reminders that all existence depended upon the delicate balance between these three eternal forces. As ages passed and the first primitive tribes began to settle in the region, they brought with them an intuitive understanding of the sacred, though they could not yet comprehend the full scope of what they had inherited. These early Hylians, blessed with pointed ears that could catch whispers of divine wisdom on the wind, began to recognize certain places as special, set apart from the mundane world around them. They felt the pull of sacred sites like migrating birds feel the call of distant shores, drawn by forces they could sense but not fully understand. The ancient sages, those wise souls who served as intermediaries between the divine and mortal realms, began to emerge from among these early peoples. They were not born to their calling, but rather awakened to it, chosen by the very forces they would spend their lives serving. These sages understood, perhaps better than anyone, that their role was not to rule or command, but to preserve and protect. They became the first keepers of sacred knowledge, the first guardians of prophecy, the first to understand that their actions in the present would echo through centuries yet unborn. These earliest prophecies, carved into stone tablets with tools blessed by divine touch, spoke in language both cryptic and profound. They told of cycles within cycles, of heroes who would rise when darkness threatened to overwhelm the world, of a sacred blade that would serve as the key to destiny itself. The sages who inscribed these prophecies did not fully understand what they were recording. They served as vessels for wisdom that flowed through them from sources beyond their comprehension. Yet they recognized the importance of their task, understanding that future generations would depend upon the preservation of this knowledge. The concept of the sacred realm began to take shape in their collective consciousness, not as a distant heaven or unreachable paradise, but as a parallel space that existed alongside the physical world, separated by barriers that were both mystical and metaphysical. This realm would serve as the ultimate sanctuary, a place where the most sacred artifacts could be protected from those who would misuse them. The idea that such a realm could be reached through proper ritual and pure intention became central to their understanding of divine will. As these early concepts crystallized into tradition and tradition hardened into sacred law, the need for a physical gateway between realms became apparent. The temple that would eventually rise on this sacred ground would serve not just as a place of worship, but as a literal doorway between worlds. Every stone that would one day form its walls, every beam that would support its roof, every inscription that would adorn its surfaces, would be placed with this ultimate purpose in mind. The transition from these primordial times to the age of active divine intervention would come gradually, like dawn breaking over distant mountains. The scattered tribes would unite, the ancient wisdom would coalesce into organized religion, and the sacred sites would transform from natural formations into constructed temples. But the foundation had been laid in these earliest times, when the world was young and the gods still walked among mortals, when the very concept of the temple of time first took root in soil blessed by divine intention. As we prepare to witness the temple's first true manifestation in the age of Skyward Sword, we must remember that its origins stretch back to this primordial era, to a time when the boundary between divine and mortal was thin as morning mist. The temple that would one day stand as guardian of the sacred realm had its true beginning here, in the dreams and visions of those first sages, in the sacred geometry inspired by divine wisdom, in the understanding that some things must endure beyond the span of any single lifetime. The eternal watch was about to begin. In the age when the earth still reached toward the heavens and mortals dwelt among the clouds, when the boundary between sky and surface marked not just physical distance, but the very division between divine purpose and earthly existence, there stood upon the surface world a structure that would become legend. The sealed temple, rising from what would one day be known as the sealed grounds, represented humanity's first true attempt to create a sacred space capable of containing forces beyond mortal comprehension. Yet this temple was born not from ambition or conquest, but from desperate necessity, forged in the crucible of a conflict that would determine the fate of all existence. The sealed grounds themselves bore witness to events that would echo through the ages, their very soil consecrated by sacrifice and watered with the tears of those who understood the true cost of protecting the world from ultimate darkness. Here, in this circular depression carved into the earth by forces both mystical and terrible, the first chapter of the Temple of Time's eternal story would unfold. The landscape bore the scars of battle, yet these wounds had healed into something sacred, transformed by divine will into a foundation upon which hope itself could be built. Impa, the ancient Sheikah warrior, whose loyalty transcended the boundaries of time itself, stood as both guardian and guide in this most crucial of eras. Her role as protector of time's flow was not merely ceremonial, but fundamental to the very fabric of reality. The Sheikah understanding of temporal mechanics, passed down through generations of shadow-walking protectors, had prepared her for this moment when the fate of all timelines would hang in the balance. Her presence in the sealed temple was not accidental but ordained, a manifestation of the cosmic forces that sought to preserve order against the tide of chaos. The original gate of time, that magnificent archway that bridged past and future with crystalline precision, stood as testament to the advanced understanding of temporal manipulation possessed by the ancient peoples. This was no mere doorway, but a conduit through which the very essence of time could flow, allowing those deemed worthy to step outside the normal progression of moments and witness events separated by centuries or millennia. The gate's construction required knowledge that transcended mortal understanding, its creators drawing upon wisdom that flowed directly from divine sources. Through this gate, the threads of destiny wove themselves into patterns of incredible complexity. The connection between past and future was not simply a matter of travel from one point in time to another, but rather an acknowledgement that all moments existed simultaneously in the divine consciousness, that past and future were merely mortal constructs imposed upon an eternal present. Those who passed through the gate of time did not merely journey through history, they became part of the great tapestry of existence itself, their actions rippling both forward and backward through the stream of ages. Princess Zelda, bearer of the goddess's blood and vessel for wisdom beyond her years, understood the terrible necessity of her sacrifice long before she accepted its weight. Her journey through time was not one of escape, but of preparation, a deliberate choice to position herself where she could serve the greatest good, regardless of personal cost. In the chamber where she would enter her sacred sleep, surrounded by the temporal energies that flowed through the sealed temple like a hidden river, she made peace with a destiny that demanded everything, while promising nothing save the continuation of hope itself. The sealing of demise, that primordial embodiment of hatred and destroyer of worlds, required more than mere physical containment. The ritual that bound the demon king beneath the earth drew upon every sacred tradition, every mystical understanding, every fragment of divine wisdom that the peoples of the surface had managed to preserve. The sealed temple became both prison and sanctuary, its very foundations infused with power sufficient to contain malice incarnate, while simultaneously serving as a beacon of hope for all who would follow. The Master Sword's first blessing within these hallowed walls marked the beginning of a bond that would transcend time itself. As the sacred blade absorbed the essence of the goddess's power, it became more than a weapon. It transformed into a key capable of unlocking not just physical barriers, but the very gates of destiny. The sword's connection to the temple was forged in this moment, creating a symbiotic relationship that would define both artifacts throughout their eternal service to the forces of light. Fi, the sword spirit whose consciousness emerged from the perfect fusion of divine will and mortal craftsmanship, experienced her first true awakening within the temple's sacred atmosphere. Her analytical mind, capable of calculating probabilities across infinite timelines, recognized the profound significance of this moment. The temple's harmonic frequencies resonated with her crystalline consciousness, creating a harmony that would influence every future iteration of the sacred structure. Her presence within the Master Sword added a layer of intelligence and purpose that elevated the blade from magical artifact to sentient guardian. The temple's layout reflected a deep understanding of sacred geometry that would influence all future religious architecture in Hyrule. Every corridor, every chamber, every carved detail served both practical and mystical purposes. The central chamber, where the most sacred rituals were performed, was positioned to channel the natural flow of divine energy that coursed through the sealed grounds. The supporting chambers provided spaces for meditation, study, and the storage of artifacts too powerful to be left unguarded. The symbolic elements woven throughout the temple's design spoke to deeper truths about the nature of existence itself. The recurring triangular motifs referenced the Triforce, but also the fundamental stability that comes from balanced forces. The spiral patterns carved into the walls mirrored the cyclical nature of time, while the vertical lines that drew the eye upward reminded all who entered that their ultimate allegiance was to powers beyond earthly concerns. These symbols were not mere decoration, but a written language that spoke directly to the soul. The transformation of the temple from active battlefield to peaceful sanctuary did not happen overnight, but rather through a gradual process of healing and consecration. The scars of conflict were not erased, but rather sanctified, incorporated into the temple's identity as reminders of the price that had been paid for peace. The blood that had been spilled in defense of the innocent became part of the sacred foundation, adding its own power to the mystical energies that flowed through the structure. The connection between surface and sky, between earthbound mortality and divine transcendence, was made manifest in every aspect of the temple's design. The high ceiling of the main chamber allowed natural light to pour in from above, creating an atmosphere of openness and connection to the heavens. The placement of windows and openings was calculated to frame views of the sky in ways that reminded visitors of the greater cosmos, of which they were part. The establishment of time manipulation as a sacred art began within these walls, where the first temporal experiments were conducted under careful supervision. The Sheikah understanding of chronomancy, developed through generations of study and practice, found its perfect expression in the temple's mystical architecture. The knowledge that time could be bent, stretched, and even temporarily reversed became one of the most closely guarded secrets of the ancient world. As Fi's consciousness merged ever more completely with the Master Sword, the temple became a repository for her vast knowledge and analytical capabilities. Her understanding of probability matrices, temporal mechanics, and divine will became part of the temple's very essence, ensuring that future guardians would have access to wisdom accumulated across countless timelines. The sword's resting place within the temple was chosen to maximize this flow of information, creating a feedback loop that strengthened both artifacts. The temple, as both tomb and cradle of heroism, represented the dual nature of all sacred spaces, places where death and rebirth, ending and beginning, past and future, converged into a single moment of infinite possibility. The heroes who would one day draw the Master's Sword from its resting place would be shaped by the temple's influence, their understanding of duty and sacrifice informed by the examples of those who had come before. The temple held within its stones the echoes of every brave soul who had ever stood against the darkness, their courage becoming part of the foundation upon which future heroes would build their own legends. The architectural philosophy that emerged from the sealed temple's construction would influence sacred building throughout Hyrule's history. The understanding that form must follow spiritual function, that every element of a sacred structure must serve the greater purpose of connecting mortal and divine, became the cornerstone of all future temple design. The proportions, the materials, the positioning of elements within the greater whole, all of these considerations had their origin in the wisdom gained through the construction and consecration of this first great temple. As the age of Skyward Sword drew to its close and the temple settled into its role as guardian of temporal mysteries, the stage was set for the great reconstruction that would come in later ages. The knowledge preserved within these walls, the understanding of sacred architecture developed through trial and consecration, the very stones themselves infused with divine purpose, all would serve as foundation for the even greater temple that would one day rise to guard the gateway between worlds. The eternal watch had begun, and the Temple of Time, in its first and most ancient form, stood ready to fulfill its destiny across the turning of the ages. The era that followed the sealing of demise brought not peace, but chaos, as mortals who had witnessed the power of the divine sought to claim that power for themselves. Wars erupted across Hyrule like wildfire, each conflict more devastating than the last, all centered around the ultimate prize that lay hidden within the sacred realm. The Triforce, that perfect embodiment of divine power, split into three essential aspects, became the obsession of kings and conquerors, sages and sorcerers, anyone who believed they possessed the wisdom and strength to wield ultimate authority over existence itself. These were dark times, when brother fought brother, when ancient alliances crumbled beneath the weight of ambition, when the very land seemed to cry out for deliverance from endless bloodshed. In the midst of this chaos, when it seemed that civilization itself might collapse beneath the weight of unchecked greed and ambition, the sage Rauru received a vision that would change the course of history. Unlike the warriors and politicians who saw only the immediate prize of the Triforce's power, Rauru understood that the sacred relics required protection, not just from those who would misuse them, but from the very access that made such misuse possible. His divine mandate was clear: construct a temple that would serve not as a monument to power, but as its guardian, a structure so perfectly designed that only the truly worthy could breach its defenses. The architectural philosophy that guided Rauru's vision went far beyond mere engineering or aesthetic consideration. This was to be a building that embodied the fundamental principles of divine order, where every stone would be placed according to cosmic law, where every chamber would serve a purpose in the greater harmony of existence. The temple's design would need to accomplish the seemingly impossible, remain accessible to the chosen hero, while remaining impenetrable to those driven by selfish ambition. The solution lay not in physical barriers alone, but in creating a structure that would test the very soul of anyone who sought to enter its most sacred chambers. The integration of Sheikah technology with traditional Hylian craftsmanship represented one of the greatest collaborative efforts in the kingdom's history. The Sheikah, master builders and keepers of ancient wisdom, brought to the project their understanding of mystical engineering, their knowledge of how to weave protective spells into stone and mortar. Their contributions were not limited to the visible aspects of construction, but extended to hidden mechanisms, secret passages, and mystical wards that would protect the temple from those who might seek to bypass its intended safeguards through stealth or sorcery. The Hylian craftsmen, renowned throughout the land for their skill in working with both common materials and enchanted substances, provided the artistic vision that would make the temple not just functional, but beautiful. They understood that a structure dedicated to divine purpose must reflect divine perfection in every detail, from the grandest archway to the smallest decorative element. Their work transformed Rauru's practical requirements into a monument of such breathtaking beauty that visitors would understand, even before entering, that they stood before something far beyond ordinary mortal achievement. The 3 spiritual stones, chosen as keys to the temple's most sacred chamber, were not arbitrary selections, but careful choices based on deep understanding of elemental harmony and spiritual significance. The Kokiri's emerald, representing the forest and the eternal cycle of growth and renewal, embodied the principle of life itself. Its verdant glow spoke to the fundamental truth that all existence depends upon the continuous cycle of birth, growth, death, and rebirth. Those who possessed this stone demonstrated their connection to the natural world and their understanding of their place within the greater web of existence. The Goron's ruby, blazing with the inner fire of the mountains themselves, represented strength and endurance, the power to stand firm against any adversity. Its crimson light reflected not just physical might, but moral courage, the willingness to face any challenge in defense of what is right. The Goron people, with their unshakable loyalty and unwavering determination, served as perfect guardians for this sacred gem, ensuring that it would only be granted to those who had proven their commitment to justice and protection of the innocent. The Zora's sapphire, cool and pure as the deepest mountain springs, embodied wisdom and clarity of thought. Its azure radiance spoke to the importance of understanding, of seeing through deception and illusion to the truth that lies beneath. The Zora, with their long lives and deep understanding of the world's hidden currents, recognized in worthy heroes the same clarity of purpose that guided their own actions. To possess their stone meant to have demonstrated not just intelligence, but wisdom, the ability to use knowledge in service of the greater good. The door of time, that massive barrier that sealed the chamber of the Master's sword, represented perhaps the most sophisticated blend of mystical and mechanical engineering ever attempted. Its construction required techniques that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible, combining traditional stonework with mystical metallurgy and temporal manipulation on a scale never before attempted. The door was designed not just to keep intruders out, but to recognize and respond to the proper combination of keys, songs, and spiritual worthiness that would identify the chosen hero. The massive portal stood as both barrier and test, its very presence a reminder that some secrets were too dangerous to be revealed to any but the most worthy. The intricate carvings that covered its surface told the story of ancient conflicts between light and darkness, serving as both decoration and warning. These images depicted not just historical events, but prophetic visions, showing future heroes what awaited them should they prove worthy to pass beyond the threshold. The chamber of the Master's sword, the Holy of Holies at the temple's heart, was designed as a perfect fusion of sacred geometry and mystical engineering. Every dimension was calculated according to divine proportions, every angle chosen to channel and focus the spiritual energies that flowed through the temple. The pedestal that would hold the sacred blade was not merely a resting place, but an integral component of the temple's mystical defenses, designed to amplify the sword's power, while simultaneously serving as the final key to the sacred realm. The chamber's acoustics were carefully planned to enhance the resonant frequencies that would accompany the opening of the portal to the sacred realm. When the Master's sword was drawn from its resting place, the very walls would sing with harmonics that had been calculated to support and stabilize the dimensional breach that would follow. The chamber served not just as a resting place for the blade, but as a launching point for the greatest adventure any hero could undertake. The altar that dominated the temple's main hall bore inscribed instructions that were masterpieces of both calligraphy and mystical inscription. These were not mere words carved into stone, but living spells, each character imbued with power that would resonate with those capable of understanding their true meaning. The instructions appeared simple to casual observers. Gather the 3 spiritual stones, bring the ocarina of time, play the song of time. But each requirement represented a test that would challenge every aspect of a hero's character. The red carpet that ran the length of the temple's main hall was no ordinary textile, but a masterwork of magical weaving that incorporated prophecy into its very fibers. The embroidered text, worked in golden thread that caught and reflected the temple's mystical lighting, told the story of the eternal hero in language that transcended ordinary communication. These were words that spoke directly to the soul, bypassing the limitations of mere intellect to convey truths that could only be understood by those destined to fulfill them. Each thread in the carpet's construction had been blessed by the sages, each pattern woven according to designs revealed through divine inspiration. The carpet served not just as decoration, but as a pathway that would guide worthy heroes toward their destiny, its mystical properties helping to prepare them spiritually for the trials that awaited beyond the door of time. The very act of walking upon this sacred textile began the process of transformation that would be completed when the hero finally drew the master sword from its pedestal. The establishment of the Song of Time as the final key to the temple's mysteries represented a recognition of music's fundamental role in the cosmic order. This was not merely a pleasant melody, but a mathematical expression of divine harmony, a sequence of notes that resonated with the fundamental frequencies upon which reality itself was constructed. The song served as both key and test, for only those who truly understood its meaning could perform it with the precision and spiritual commitment necessary to activate the temple's deepest mysteries. The temple's role as gateway between realms required not just the physical portal that would be opened by the Master Sword, but a complete understanding of the metaphysical relationship between the mortal world and the sacred realm. The architects and mystics who designed the temple had to account for the different laws that governed each realm, creating a structure that could exist simultaneously in both while remaining stable in either. This was perhaps the greatest achievement of mystical architecture ever attempted, a building that served as a bridge between dimensions. The protection mechanisms built into the temple's structure operated on multiple levels, from the obvious barriers that would deter casual intruders to the subtle influences that would guide worthy heroes toward their destiny. Hidden throughout the building were mystical wards that would activate in response to various threats, protective spells that would strengthen the temple's defenses if attacked, and guidance enchantments that would help the chosen hero navigate both the physical and spiritual challenges that awaited them. As the great work neared completion, Rauru himself took up residence within the temple, his very presence adding the final element to its mystical defenses. His role as the Sage of Light made him the perfect guardian for this gateway between worlds, his understanding of both divine will and mortal necessity, enabling him to serve as the final arbiter of who would be permitted to pass into the sacred realm. His eternal vigil would ensure that the temple's purpose remained pure, that its power would never be corrupted by those who sought to use it for selfish ends. The completed Temple of Time stood as more than just a building. It was a living embodiment of divine will, a structure that pulsed with sacred energy and responded to the spiritual state of all who entered its halls. The temple served as fortress, sanctuary, testing ground, and gateway, fulfilling multiple functions while maintaining perfect harmony in its design and purpose. As Rauru sealed the final mystical protections into place, the temple began its eternal watch, ready to serve its purpose when the chosen hero would finally arrive to claim his destiny and open the way to the sacred realm. The ancient stones of the Temple of Time held secrets written in languages that predated the common tongue of Hyrule by countless generations, inscriptions whose meanings had been lost to all but the most dedicated scholars of mystical linguistics. These were not mere decorative elements or simple historical records, but prophecies encoded in script so archaic that even the Sheikah, keepers of ancient wisdom, required years of study to unlock their deepest meanings. The discovery that these inscriptions incorporated elements derived from an even more ancient source, linguistic patterns that bore striking resemblance to the sacred dialects used in the most remote corners of the world, revealed the truly universal nature of the prophecies they contained. The archaic influences woven throughout the Hylian script demonstrated a sophistication of language that spoke to the temple builders' understanding of communication as more than mere exchange of information. These were words chosen not just for their meaning, but for their resonance, their ability to speak directly to the consciousness of those destined to receive their message. The syntax itself followed patterns that existed in harmony with the mystical frequencies that flowed through the temple, creating a form of written magic that could convey meaning across the barriers of time and cultural change. The red carpet that stretched the full length of the temple's main hall bore embroidered text, whose translation revealed prophecies of staggering significance. The golden threads that formed each character had been infused with mystical properties that made them visible to those with the spiritual sensitivity to perceive their true meaning, while remaining merely decorative to casual observers. The primary inscription, worked in the most prominent position where every visitor would walk across its surface, spoke of a warrior whose courage would echo through eternity. The prophetic text declared that this courageous warrior would be named thus for all time, not merely as a historical figure, but as an eternal principle, a force of nature that would manifest again and again whenever darkness threatened to overwhelm the world. The phrasing suggested not reincarnation in the conventional sense, but something far more profound, the eternal return of heroic virtue itself, taking whatever form was necessary to meet each age's particular challenges. This warrior's ultimate destiny was to defeat resoundingly the aftermath of flawed malice, that corrupted essence of pure hatred that emerged from the deepest wells of evil. The concept of flawed malice, as revealed through careful analysis of the ancient text, represented something far more specific and terrifying than ordinary wickedness or even deliberate evil. This was malice in its purest form, distilled from the fundamental opposition to all that lived and thrived and grew toward the light. Yet it was described as flawed, suggesting an inherent weakness or incompleteness that would ultimately prove its undoing. The prophecy implied that this malice, for all its power and persistence, contained within itself the seeds of its own defeat. The door's capstone inscription, carved in letters so deeply etched that they seemed to drink in the light that fell upon them, provided cryptic guidance about the hidden chambers that lay beyond the Great Barrier. The text instructed those who would enter to behold the chamber with filtering light, a description that proved remarkably accurate to the actual architecture of the sacred space. The single beam of sunlight that penetrated the chamber at all hours, defying conventional understanding of how light behaved, served as both illumination and spiritual presence. The instruction to look for the secret spoke to deeper truths about the nature of seeking and finding in the spiritual realm. This was not merely advice to search thoroughly, but recognition that the greatest secrets revealed themselves only to those who combined diligent effort with proper spiritual preparation. The secret was not hidden through any desire to obstruct or confuse, but rather protected by its own nature, visible only to those who had demonstrated the wisdom and purity necessary to use such knowledge responsibly. The description of the hearth-shaped arch as the door provided both literal architectural detail and symbolic significance that resonated throughout Hyrulean culture. The hearth represented the heart of the home, the source of warmth and light around which families gathered for safety and comfort. By describing the door in these terms, the inscription suggested that what lay beyond was not alien or threatening, but rather the ultimate sanctuary, the true home toward which all spiritual seeking ultimately led. The temple builders' intent to guide future heroes went far beyond simple instruction or advice. These inscriptions were designed as spiritual tools, their very words carrying power that would help prepare the chosen one for the trials ahead. The act of reading and understanding these ancient texts became part of the hero's preparation, each translated phrase adding to their comprehension of the vast cosmic forces they would soon confront. The builders understood that knowledge itself could serve as a form of protection, that understanding one's place in the great pattern of existence provided strength that no weapon could match. The connections between these temple inscriptions and similar prophetic texts found throughout Hyrule's other sacred sites revealed a coordinated effort to preserve and transmit essential knowledge across the ages. The same themes appeared in different forms across multiple locations, ensuring that even if some sites were lost or destroyed, the crucial information would survive. The repetition was not mere redundancy, but rather a recognition that such vital knowledge required multiple safeguards against the erosion of time and the destructive power of those who sought to suppress unwelcome truths. The Sheikah's role in preserving this ancient knowledge extended beyond simple translation or record-keeping into the realm of active guardianship. They served as living libraries, each generation passing down not just the words themselves, but the proper intonation, the spiritual context, and the practical applications that gave the prophecies their power. The Sheikah understood that written words, no matter how carefully preserved, could become lifeless symbols without the breathing tradition that kept their meaning alive. The hidden chambers referenced in the inscriptions proved to be more than mere secret rooms or concealed passages. These were spaces that existed partially outside normal reality, their dimensions and properties altered by the same mystical forces that connected the temple to the sacred realm. The chamber with filtering light served as a transition space, a place where visitors could begin to adjust to the different laws that governed the realm beyond the door of time. The filtering light itself proved to be more than mere illumination when subjected to careful study by those capable of perceiving its true nature. This light carried within it information from the sacred realm, subtle vibrations that could prepare sensitive individuals for the transition between worlds. The seemingly simple beam of sunlight was actually a complex carrier wave, transmitting data about the spiritual requirements necessary for survival in the realm beyond. The symbolic meaning of the hearth-shaped arch went deeper than mere architectural metaphor when examined in the context of Hyrulean spiritual tradition. The hearth represented not just physical warmth, but the flame of life itself, the spark of consciousness that animated all living beings. To pass through the hearth-shaped door was to undergo a form of spiritual rebirth, to be purified by sacred fire and prepared for transformation into something greater than ordinary mortal existence. The temple builder's knowledge of the Demon King's curse and its recurring nature revealed an understanding of cosmic cycles that transcended ordinary historical awareness. They recognized that evil was not a temporary aberration to be defeated once and forgotten, but rather a fundamental force that would manifest repeatedly in different forms throughout history. Their prophecies were designed to prepare not just one hero, but all the heroes who would be called upon to face this eternal threat. The connections to other prophetic texts throughout Hyrule's sacred sites demonstrated a level of coordination and planning that spanned multiple generations of builders and scribes. The same core message appeared in different forms across various locations, each adapted to its specific architectural and cultural context, while maintaining the essential information needed by future heroes. This redundancy ensured that even if multiple sites were lost or destroyed, the crucial knowledge would survive in some form. The preservation of this knowledge required not just physical protection, but active, spiritual maintenance. The inscriptions were not merely carved words, but living spells, their power requiring periodic renewal through proper ritual and ceremony. The temple's guardians understood that neglecting these mystical texts would result in their gradual degradation, not just as written records, but as functional magical tools designed to aid and guide the chosen hero. The deeper analysis of these ancient texts revealed layers of meaning that became apparent only when studied in conjunction with the temple's overall mystical architecture. The inscriptions were not independent elements, but integral components of the temple's spiritual machinery, each word positioned to contribute to the overall effect that the structure was designed to produce. The placement of each text was as carefully calculated as the positioning of each stone, creating a harmonious whole that was greater than the sum of its parts. As scholars continued to decode the full meaning of these ancient prophecies, they uncovered evidence of a grand design that encompassed not just the Temple of Time, but the entire network of sacred sites throughout Hyrule. The temple builders had created more than a single sanctuary. They had established a mystical infrastructure that would support and guide heroes across multiple generations, ensuring that each would have access to the wisdom and resources necessary to fulfill their destiny in the eternal struggle between light and darkness. The young hero approached the Temple of Time through streets that still echoed with the sounds of celebration from the previous day's festival. The 3 spiritual stones secured in his possession like fragments of destiny finally coming together. The Kokiri's emerald pulsed with the gentle rhythm of forest life, its verdant glow a reminder of the sacred grove where he had first learned the true meaning of courage. The Goron's ruby burned with inner fire that spoke of brotherhood forged in the heart of mountains, while the Zora's sapphire shimmered with the deep wisdom of ancient waters. Each stone carried within it not just mystical power, but the trust of entire peoples who had recognized in this young wanderer the hero foretold in their oldest legends. The journey to collect these sacred artifacts had transformed Link from a boy without a fairy into something approaching the hero of prophecy. Yet he remained unaware of the cosmic forces that had guided every step of his path. Each trial had been designed not merely to test his abilities, but to prepare him spiritually for the moment when he would claim his ultimate destiny. The friendships he had forged, the wisdom he had gained, the courage he had discovered within himself, All had been necessary preparation for what awaited him beyond the door of time. As he crossed the bridge leading to Castletown, the very air seemed to thicken, with an ominous presence that made the spiritual stones pulse with warning light. The festival banners that had fluttered so cheerfully in the morning breeze now hung limp and still, as if the world itself held its breath in anticipation of some terrible revelation. The townspeople who had filled the streets with laughter and music had vanished, leaving behind an eerie silence that spoke of catastrophe beyond ordinary comprehension. The sight that greeted him as he crested the hill overlooking Hyrule Castle struck him like a physical blow, shattering his innocent understanding of how the world was meant to work. Flames reached toward the darkening sky like grasping fingers, their orange glow reflecting off the smoke that billowed from what had once been the kingdom's shining heart. The castle that had stood as a symbol of order and protection for generations was being consumed by fires that seemed to burn with unnatural hunger, devouring stone and timber with equal ferocity. Through this hellscape of destruction, a desperate chase unfolded before his horrified eyes. Princess Zelda, the same wise and kind ruler who had entrusted him with his quest, fled on horseback with her faithful guardian Impa, their white steed seeming to fly across the burning landscape as they raced toward an uncertain future. Behind them, in pursuit, like a dark storm given form, rode a figure whose very presence seemed to drain light from the world around him. Even at this distance, Link could feel the malevolent power that radiated from Ganondorf like heat from a forge. The moment when their eyes met across the chaos would be burned into Link's memory forever. Ganondorf's gaze pierced through him with an intensity that seemed to strip away all pretense and see directly into his soul. In that instant, the Gerudo King recognized the boy who carried the stones he needed, while Link understood for the first time that he faced an enemy whose power and cunning far exceeded anything he had previously encountered. The world seemed to slow as Ganondorf pulled his mighty steed to a halt, his attention focused entirely on this unexpected obstacle to his plans. Princess Zelda, even in her desperate flight, took the time to ensure that hope would survive her capture. The Ocarina of Time, that sacred instrument which had been passed down through generations of the royal family, flew from her hand in a perfect arc that carried it safely away from the approaching darkness. The blue gem caught the firelight as it sailed through the air, its surface reflecting not just the flames of the burning city, but the hopes and dreams of an entire kingdom that now rested in the hands of a single young hero. The confrontation between Link and Ganondorf, though brief, revealed the vast gulf that separated them in both power and purpose. When the Dark Lord demanded information about Zelda's whereabouts, his voice carried the authority of one who had never been denied, the confidence of absolute power, backed by the Triforce of power that already pulsed within his being. Link's refusal to answer, though it cost him dearly, demonstrated the unbreakable spirit that marked him as the true hero of time, willing to endure any suffering rather than betray those who had placed their trust in him. The dark magic that knocked Link to the ground was more than mere force. It was a taste of the corruption that had already begun to spread from Ganondorf's presence. The energy that coursed through the young hero's body carried with it visions of the darkness that would engulf Hyrule if the sacred realm fell into evil hands. In that moment of pain and helplessness, Link glimpsed the terrible future that awaited his world, the 7 years of darkness that would follow if he failed in his ultimate quest. The retrieval of the Ocarina of Time from the castle moat marked the beginning of Link's transformation, from unwitting participant to conscious agent of destiny. As his fingers closed around the sacred instrument, he felt the weight of generations of heroes who had come before, the echo of their courage and determination flowing through the mystical artifact into his own spirit. The ocarina was warm to the touch, as if it had been waiting for his hand specifically, its surface bearing the subtle vibrations of power that connected it to the very foundations of reality. The telepathic connection that formed between Link and Princess Zelda as he held the ocarina revealed depths of mystical communion that neither had previously experienced. Through this sacred bond, knowledge flowed from her consciousness to his, carrying with it not just the melody of the Song of Time, but understanding of its cosmic significance. The notes were not mere music, but mathematical expressions of fundamental forces, frequencies that resonated with the building blocks of creation itself. Learning the Song of Time through this mystical transmission was unlike any ordinary musical instruction. Each note carried with it layers of meaning that went far beyond sound, harmonics that spoke to the soul rather than the ear. As the melody took root in Link's consciousness, he began to understand that he was learning more than a song. He was being initiated into mysteries that connected him to the very flow of time itself. The music became part of him, its rhythm aligning with his heartbeat, its harmony becoming the soundtrack to his transformation from boy to hero. The journey to the Temple of Time, beyond Castle Town's main square, was both a physical pilgrimage and a spiritual preparation for what awaited within the sacred structure. Each step carried him further from his old life, and closer to a destiny that would change not just his own fate, but the fate of the entire world. The temple's spires rose before him like fingers pointing toward divine purpose, their ancient stones radiating power that he could feel even before crossing the threshold. The act of placing the 3 spiritual stones upon the altar was a moment of convergence that had been building throughout his entire quest. As each stone found its proper place, the altar began to resonate with harmonies that spoke to the deep magic woven into the temple's foundations. The Kokiri's emerald pulsed with life force, the Goron's ruby blazed with earthly power, and the Zora's sapphire shimmered with wisdom accumulated across ages. Together, they formed a perfect trinity that unlocked the first layer of the temple's mystical defenses. When Link raised the Ocarina of Time to his lips and began to play the Song of Time, the entire temple responded as if awakening from a long slumber. The notes rang through the sacred space with crystalline clarity, each tone seeming to activate dormant mechanisms that had waited centuries for this moment. The song was not merely heard, but felt, its vibrations traveling through stone and steel, through air and spirit, until every part of the temple rang in perfect harmony with the ancient melody. The opening of the door of time was a spectacle that combined mechanical precision with mystical grandeur. Massive gears that had remained motionless for generations began to turn with smooth precision, their movement accompanied by harmonics that suggested the very fabric of reality was being carefully adjusted. Stone blocks, weighing many tons, shifted as if they were made of air, revealing the carefully engineered mechanisms that the ancient builders had designed to respond to this specific combination of keys and songs. As the great door swung open, revealing the chamber beyond, Link found himself looking into a space that seemed to exist partially outside normal reality. The Master Sword rested upon its pedestal like a beacon of pure light, its blade catching and reflecting illumination that seemed to come from sources beyond the merely physical. The chamber's proportions created an effect that made the sword appear both impossibly distant and immediately within reach, a paradox that spoke to the mystical nature of the space itself. The approach to the pedestal of time was both the shortest and longest walk of Link's life. Each step carried him further into destiny, each moment bringing him closer to a transformation that would fundamentally alter his relationship with the world around him. The Master Sword's presence grew stronger with each step, its consciousness reaching out to evaluate this young hero who sought to claim it as his own. Fi's analytical processes engaged fully, calculating probabilities and measuring spiritual compatibility with precision that transcended mortal understanding. The moment when Link's fingers closed around the Master Sword's hilt was one of perfect communion between hero, blade, and cosmic purpose. The rush of magical energy that issued forth from the pedestal was visible as streams of light that seemed to tear holes in reality itself, opening pathways between dimensions that had been sealed for ages. The portal to the sacred realm materialized like a window into paradise, its surface shimmering with possibilities that lay beyond mortal comprehension. Yet even as triumph seemed within his grasp, the cruel irony of destiny revealed itself. Link's youth, which had enabled him to maintain the pure heart necessary to claim the sword, now became the barrier that prevented him from wielding it properly. The Master Sword, recognizing this fundamental incompatibility, acted to preserve both hero and blade by placing Link in a state of mystical suspension that would preserve him unchanged until time itself had seasoned his spirit sufficiently. The 7-year sleep that followed was not ordinary slumber, but a form of spiritual chrysalis, a transformation chamber where the boy who had claimed the sword would be slowly and carefully reformed into the man capable of wielding it. Within the Temple of Light, suspended between worlds and outside the normal flow of time, Link's body matured, while his spirit underwent refinements that could not be achieved through ordinary experience. Dreams that were more than dreams carried him through visions of possible futures, each scenario preparing him for the challenges that would await his awakening. Ganondorf's infiltration of the sacred realm through the portal Link had opened marked the beginning of the great cataclysm that would reshape Hyrule according to his dark vision. His touch upon the Triforce caused it to fragment according to the fundamental law that such power could only be wielded by those who possessed perfect balance of courage, wisdom, and power. The Triforce of power remained with him, recognizing in his overwhelming ambition and strength the qualities it was designed to enhance, while the other two pieces sought out those souls most perfectly. Aligned with their essential natures, the 7 dark years that followed transformed Hyrule from a kingdom of light and prosperity into a realm where fear ruled and hope flickered like candles in a storm. Ganondorf's iron fist shaped the land, according to his vision of order through strength, while always searching for the 2 individuals who possessed the other fragments of the Triforce. His rule was marked not just by oppression, but by a fundamental alteration of the natural order, as his corrupted power seeped into the very soil and stones of the kingdom. As Link slept within his mystical cocoon, unaware of the darkness spreading across the world he had sworn to protect, the stage was set for the awakening that would launch the final phase of his heroic journey. The boy who had entered the chamber would emerge as a man, armed with the Master Sword and bearing the Triforce of courage, ready to face the ultimate test of his worthiness as the hero of time. The sacred realm existed as something far beyond mortal understanding of space and dimension, a parallel universe where the fundamental laws that governed ordinary reality bent and flowed according to divine will rather than physical necessity. This was not simply another place that could be reached through ordinary travel, but rather a state of existence where matter and spirit merged into something approaching pure perfection. The very air within the sacred realm hummed with power that would have overwhelmed unprepared mortals, yet for those deemed worthy to enter, it provided sustenance and strength that transcended any earthly nourishment. Within this realm of infinite possibility stood the Temple of Light, the sacred realm's beating heart and the architectural embodiment of divine harmony, made manifest in crystalline stone and celestial energy. Unlike its counterpart in the mortal world, this temple existed in a state of eternal perfection, its walls carved from substances that caught and reflected light in patterns that spoke directly to the soul. Every surface gleamed with inner radiance that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the cosmic forces that maintained the balance between order and chaos throughout all existence. The Temple of Light served as more than mere sanctuary or place of worship. It functioned as the central control mechanism for the entire sacred realm, its mystical architecture designed to channel and focus the divine energies that flowed through this parallel dimension. The temple's spires reached toward a sky that showed not a single sun, but rather a dome of pure luminescence that provided perfect illumination without shadow or darkness. This eternal light was not harsh or glaring, but rather possessed a quality of warmth and comfort that seemed to emanate from the very essence of benevolence itself. Rauru, the ancient sage of light, had taken up permanent residence within this temple long before the events that would bring the hero of time to its sacred chambers. His eternal vigil was not a burden imposed by duty, but rather the natural expression of his perfect alignment with divine purpose. The sage's physical form had undergone a transformation over the centuries of his guardianship, becoming more luminous and ethereal with each passing year, until he seemed to be composed as much of pure light as of flesh and bone. The chamber where Link would spend his 7 years of mystical sleep had been prepared specifically for this purpose, its dimensions and properties calculated to provide the perfect environment for the hero's transformation from boy to man. The crystalline walls that surrounded the sleeping hero pulsed with gentle rhythms that synchronized with his heartbeat, breathing, and brainwaves, creating a cocoon of perfect harmony that would preserve his body while allowing his spirit to grow and mature according to divine timing. Within this chamber, time itself flowed differently than in either the mortal world or the rest of the sacred realm. The 7 years that passed in Hyrule were experienced by the sleeping hero as a single extended dream, a vision quest that carried him through landscapes of pure possibility where he could encounter the essence of heroism itself. In these dream journeys, Link walked with the spirits of heroes who had come before, learning from their experiences and absorbing their wisdom without the pain and loss that had accompanied their original struggles. The connection between the temples of both realms was more than mere architectural similarity. They were literally two aspects of the same mystical structure, existing simultaneously in both dimensions, yet remaining perfectly synchronized in their purpose and function. When the door of time opened in the mortal temple, corresponding pathways activated in the temple of light, creating a continuous channel through which worthy souls could pass between realms. This connection was maintained by spiritual energy that flowed like a river of light between the two structures. The Master's sword served as more than just a key or weapon in this mystical system. It functioned as an anchor that kept both realms properly aligned, despite the fundamental differences in their nature and laws. The blade's unique properties allowed it to exist fully in both dimensions simultaneously. Its physical form present in the mortal temple, while its spiritual essence resonated through the sacred realm's temple of light. This dual existence made the sword the perfect conduit for the hero's transformation. The spiritual energy that flowed through the sacred realm was not uniform or static, but rather composed of countless individual streams, each carrying different aspects of divine will and cosmic purpose. These currents converged within the Temple of Light, like rivers meeting at a sacred confluence, their combined power creating the conditions necessary for miracles to occur. The sages who served as guardians of this realm learned to read these energy flows like ancient mariners reading wind and tide. Rauru's role as the Sage of Light went far beyond simple guardianship or protection of the sacred realm's treasures. He served as the living embodiment of divine illumination, his very presence maintaining the delicate balance that allowed the realm to exist in its state of perfect harmony. His consciousness had expanded over the centuries to encompass not just his individual awareness, but a direct connection to the cosmic forces that govern the relationship between light and darkness throughout all existence. The sage's collective responsibility for maintaining the balance of the sacred realm required a level of cooperation and coordination that transcended ordinary mortal understanding. Each sage brought their own unique perspective and abilities to the task, yet all worked in perfect harmony toward the common goal of preserving the realm's sanctity. Their individual temples, scattered throughout both the sacred realm and the mortal world, served as anchor points that helped stabilize the mystical connections between dimensions. The awakening chamber where Link would eventually return to consciousness had been designed as a birthing room for heroes, its every feature calculated to ease the transition from mystical sleep to active heroism. The walls were inscribed with protective symbols that would shield the newly awakened hero from the disorientation that might otherwise accompany such a dramatic transformation. Soft light filtered through crystalline panels that had been cut and positioned to create an atmosphere of safety and welcome. The reunion between hero and blade after 7 years of separation was not simply a matter of picking up a weapon, but rather a renewal of spiritual partnership that had been deepened and strengthened by their shared experience of transformation. The Master Sword had spent those 7 years absorbing and channeling the divine energies of the sacred realm. Its already considerable power enhanced by prolonged exposure to the purest sources of light and goodness. Fi's consciousness had also evolved during this period. Her analytical capabilities expanded through contact with divine wisdom. The Temple of Light's influence extended throughout the entire sacred realm, its mystical emanations creating zones of different spiritual intensity that served various purposes in the cosmic order. Near the temple's heart, the concentration of divine energy was so intense that it could instantly purify any corruption or darkness, while the outer regions provided gentler environments where newly arrived souls could gradually acclimate to the realm's perfected conditions. The restorative properties of the awakening chamber went beyond mere physical healing to encompass spiritual and emotional renewal as well. The 7 years of sleep had not only allowed Link's body to mature, but it also prepared his mind and spirit for the trials that awaited him in the corrupted mortal world. The chamber's influence helped him integrate the wisdom he had gained through his dream journeys, while maintaining the essential purity of heart that made him worthy to wield the Master Sword. During the 7 years of Link's sleep, the Temple of Light had served as a refuge for those few souls who had managed to escape the corruption that Ganondorf's influence had spread throughout the mortal realm. These refugees, both living and departed spirits, found solace within the temple's perfect harmony while contributing their own knowledge and experience to the cosmic library of wisdom that the sages maintained for future heroes. The divine illumination that permeated every corner of the Temple of Light was not merely decorative, but served essential functions in maintaining the realm's spiritual ecosystem. This light carried information encoded in its very wavelengths, transmitting knowledge and guidance to those capable of perceiving its deeper meanings. The sages had learned to read these light patterns like books, extracting wisdom that had been preserved from the very beginning of creation. The preparation of the chamber for Link's eventual awakening involved not just physical arrangements, but the careful orchestration of spiritual forces that would ease his transition back to active heroism. Rauru and the other sages worked together to create a harmonious environment that would provide the newly awakened hero with immediate access to the knowledge and power he would need to face the challenges awaiting him in the corrupted mortal world. The perfect harmony that characterized the Temple of Light extended to every aspect of its existence, from the mathematical precision of its architectural proportions to the way its mystical emanations synchronized with the cosmic rhythms that governed the dance between creation and destruction. This harmony was not accidental, but rather the result of careful design by beings who understood the fundamental principles upon which all existence was based. As Link's 7-year sleep neared its end, the Temple of Light began to resonate with anticipation, its crystalline structures responding to the approaching moment when the hero would finally awaken to claim his destiny. The sacred realm itself seemed to hold its breath as the time approached for the Chosen One to return to the world of mortal struggle, armed with the wisdom gained through his mystical transformation and ready to face the ultimate test of his worthiness as the hero of time. The temple had served its purpose as sanctuary and transformation chamber, but now it prepared to serve its final role as launching point for the greatest adventure in the history of both realms. The concept of malice, as it manifested throughout Hyrule's history, represented something far more insidious and fundamental than ordinary evil or wickedness. This was hatred in its most crystallized form, a substance that existed at the intersection of spiritual corruption and physical reality, capable of taking on properties that defied natural law. Malice was not simply an emotion or attitude, but rather a force of nature that accumulated like sediment in the deepest places of the world, growing stronger and more concentrated with each act of cruelty, each moment of despair, each instance where darkness triumphed over light. The ancient texts discovered within the Temple of Time described malice as the opposite of gratitude, the antithesis of the positive emotions that created force gems and powered the beneficial magics that protected Hyrule from corruption, where gratitude crystallized into pure energy that could heal wounds and restore life. Malice condensed into a substance that drained vitality and spread corruption like a spiritual plague. The balance between these opposing forces was not merely philosophical, but represented the fundamental conflict that shaped the destiny of all living beings. Demise's curse, spoken in his final moments as the eternal seal was placed upon his darkness, was not merely a threat or expression of defiance, but rather a metaphysical law that he imposed upon the very structure of reality itself. The curse ensured that his malice would survive the destruction of his physical form, seeping into the spiritual foundations of the world, where it would fester and grow until it could manifest in new incarnations. Each manifestation would carry within it the accumulated hatred of all previous forms, growing stronger and more sophisticated with each cycle. The hero's spirit, in contrast, represented the eternal principle of selfless courage that arose naturally in response to the presence of overwhelming darkness. This was not reincarnation in the conventional sense, but rather the manifestation of heroic virtue itself, taking whatever form was necessary to meet the specific challenges of each age. The spirit carried within it the accumulated wisdom and experience of all previous heroes. Yet each incarnation remained fundamentally unique, shaped by the circumstances of their particular time and place. The Temple of Time served as a constant anchor point in this eternal cycle, its presence providing stability and continuity as the world around it was transformed by the endless struggle between light and darkness. The temple's mystical architecture was designed to recognize and respond to both malice and heroic virtue, its defenses strengthening in the presence of corruption, while its doors opened readily for those who carried the light of true heroism within their hearts. The building itself became a participant in the cosmic conflict, its very stones imbued with the accumulated spiritual energy of countless rituals and ceremonies. Ganondorf's various incarnations across the ages demonstrated the different ways in which Demise's curse could manifest, each form adapted to exploit the specific weaknesses and blind spots of the era in which it appeared. The Gerudo king, who first stole into the sacred realm, represented cunning and political manipulation, using mortal systems of power and authority to achieve his dark goals. Later manifestations would take different approaches, sometimes appearing as pure force of destruction, other times as subtle corrupter, working through existing institutions and beliefs. The temple's response to each manifestation of evil revealed the sophisticated nature of its mystical defenses. The building could sense the approach of corrupted souls long before they reached its physical boundaries, its protective enchantments strengthening automatically in response to the level of threat presented. Yet it also remained open to those who carried even a spark of genuine heroism, its doors yielding to the touch of the worthy, while remaining impassable barriers to those with evil intentions. The role of gratitude and force as opposing energies to malice created a cosmic ecosystem where the actions and attitudes of ordinary people could influence the balance between light and darkness on a fundamental level. Every act of kindness, every moment of genuine appreciation, every expression of love and compassion contributed to the accumulated power of light that served as a bulwark against the spread of corruption. The temple's builders understood this principle and incorporated it into the structure's design, creating spaces where positive emotions could be channeled and concentrated. The cursed beings touched by malice throughout history served as both warnings and teachers, their transformations revealing the progressive stages through which corruption could spread through both individual souls and entire communities. The ancient texts described how malice could begin as simple resentment or justified anger, then gradually consume more and more of the victim's spirit until nothing remained but hollow hunger for destruction. These cursed beings were not simply enemies to be defeated, but rather tragic examples of what awaited any soul that opened itself to the influence of crystallized hatred. The temple's protective influence against corruption extended far beyond its physical boundaries, its mystical emanations creating zones of spiritual cleansing that could slow or even reverse the spread of malice in the surrounding area. The builders had positioned the temple at a nexus of spiritual energy that allowed its influence to flow along hidden channels throughout the kingdom, creating a network of protection that reinforced the natural barriers between light and darkness. The Master Sword's evolution through repeated conflicts with malice demonstrated the dynamic nature of the eternal struggle between good and evil. Each encounter with corruption taught the blade new ways to recognize and counter the influence of darkness, its consciousness gradually accumulating strategies and techniques that would prove effective against future manifestations. The sword served not just as a weapon, but as a repository of hard-won wisdom about the nature of evil and the methods most effective in combating it. The sage's responsibility in maintaining the cycle went far beyond simple guardianship of their respective temples and domains. They served as active participants in the cosmic balance, their combined wisdom and power creating a network of protection that helped ensure the hero's spirit would always find a suitable vessel when the time came for it to manifest. Their role required not just magical ability, but deep understanding of the psychological and spiritual conditions that fostered either heroism or corruption. The temple's function as record-keeper of the eternal struggle was perhaps its most important and least understood purpose. Within its mystical architecture, every conflict between light and darkness was preserved in forms that could be accessed by future heroes and sages. These records were not mere historical accounts, but living memories that could provide tactical and strategic information about the nature of evil and the methods most effective in defeating it. The balance between destruction and preservation that characterized the eternal cycle required constant vigilance and adjustment from those who understood its deeper implications. The temple served as both fortress against corruption and sanctuary for those who carried the light, its dual nature reflecting the complex reality that protection sometimes required the use of force against those who would harm the innocent. The builders had incorporated this understanding into every aspect of the structure's design. The spiritual mechanics that governed the manifestation of both malice and heroic virtue revealed the fundamental truth that consciousness itself was the battlefield where the ultimate fate of all existence would be determined. The temple's mystical properties were designed to amplify and focus the power of enlightened consciousness, while simultaneously providing barriers against the influence of corrupted awareness. Every meditation hall, every prayer chamber, every sacred alcove served a specific function in this cosmic struggle. The accumulated wisdom preserved within the temple's walls included not just knowledge of past conflicts, but prophetic insights into the forms that future manifestations of evil might take. The sages who served as guardians of this knowledge understood that each cycle of the conflict would bring new challenges that required innovative responses. Yet the fundamental principles that governed the struggle between light and darkness remained constant across all ages. The mystical resonance between the temple and the hero's spirit created a form of spiritual GPS that would guide each incarnation toward their destiny, regardless of the specific circumstances of their birth or upbringing. This guidance was subtle rather than obvious, manifesting as intuitive understanding rather than direct communication, allowing each hero to maintain their essential humanity while gradually awakening to their cosmic purpose. The protection of innocence emerged as one of the primary functions that the temple was designed to serve, its influence extending special shielding to those souls who had not yet been touched by the corruption that inevitably accompanied exposure to the darker aspects of existence. Children, in particular, benefited from the temple's protective emanations, their natural purity resonating harmoniously with the building's consecrated architecture. As the eternal cycle continued its endless revolution, the Temple of Time stood as proof that some things transcended the temporary victories and defeats that marked individual conflicts between light and darkness. The temple represented the eternal principles that no amount of corruption could permanently destroy, the enduring hope that good would ultimately triumph not through overwhelming force, but through the persistent application of wisdom, compassion, and selfless courage across countless generations of heroes and guardians. Centuries had passed since the hero of time had restored peace to Hyrule, and the inexorable march of ages had transformed the landscape that surrounded the Temple of Time into something that would have been barely recognizable to those who had known it in its glory. The passage of time had a way of humbling even the mightiest works of mortals and sages alike, yet the temple itself remained, though changed by forces both natural and supernatural that had shaped the kingdom through periods of prosperity and decline. The surrounding city that had once bustled with merchants, pilgrims, and scholars had long since fallen to ruin, its proud buildings reduced to scattered foundations and broken walls that spoke of a civilization that had reached great heights before succumbing to the inevitable entropy that claimed all mortal endeavors. Archaeological evidence suggested that the city's destruction had not come all at once, but rather through a gradual process of abandonment and decay, as if the very will to maintain these structures had slowly drained away over generations. The reasons for this abandonment remained shrouded in mystery, with various theories proposed by the few scholars who still studied the ancient sites. Some suggested that political upheavals had forced the population to relocate to more defensible positions, while others pointed to evidence of natural disasters that might have made the area uninhabitable for extended periods. The most intriguing theory, however, proposed that the temple's own mystical emanations had gradually increased in intensity over the centuries, creating an environment that ordinary mortals found increasingly difficult to tolerate. The sacred grove that had grown up around the temple's foundations represented a different kind of reclamation, as if the earth itself had decided to embrace and protect the ancient structure with a living blanket of roots and branches. These trees were not ordinary forest growth, but rather mystical vegetation that drew its nourishment from the spiritual energies that continued to flow through the temple's consecrated stones. Their unusual properties became apparent to anyone who spent time studying them, as they seemed to respond to the emotional states of visitors and exhibited growth patterns that defied conventional botanical understanding. The Door of Time, that massive portal that had once guarded the chamber of the Master Sword, had undergone a transformation that puzzled those who discovered it in its new position. Archaeological evidence suggested that at some point during the intervening centuries, the door had been carefully removed from its original location within the temple and reinstalled as the main entrance to the structure itself. This relocation must have required extraordinary engineering skill and mystical knowledge, as the door's mystical properties remained intact despite its physical displacement. The implications of this architectural modification were profound for those who understood the door's original purpose and design. By positioning the Door of Time as the primary entrance to the temple, later builders or mystics had effectively transformed the entire structure into a temporal gateway. This change suggested that during some period of Hyrule's history, there had been a need or desire to control access not just to the chamber of the Master Sword, but to the temple complex as a whole. The new Link who would eventually discover these ruins came from a very different world than the hero of time who had first opened the door centuries earlier. This young man had grown up in a rural village where the ancient legends were regarded more as entertaining stories than historical fact, where the great conflicts between light and darkness seemed like distant fairy tales that had little relevance to the practical concerns of daily life. His journey to the ruins would represent not just a physical quest, but a gradual awakening to the reality of forces that most of his contemporaries preferred to ignore. The transformation of the temple's surroundings into a location of mystery and legend had created an atmosphere that both attracted and repelled potential visitors. Those with sensitivity to mystical energies often reported feeling drawn to the area by forces they could not explain, while others experienced an inexplicable unease that convinced them to avoid the ruins entirely. This selective attraction ensured that only those with specific spiritual qualities or pressing need would make the effort to seek out the ancient temple. The discovery that time manipulation was still possible within the ruins came as a shock to those who had assumed that such powers belonged only to the distant past. The new Link's ability to travel between different time periods using the modified door suggested that the temple's mystical properties had not diminished, but had rather evolved and adapted to the changing spiritual landscape of Hyrule. This time, travel capability would prove crucial in understanding the full scope of the threats that faced the kingdom. The temple's role in housing fragments of the Mirror of Twilight revealed new depths to its function, as a repository for dangerous artifacts. The mirror's pieces, scattered across Hyrule to prevent their misuse, had been drawn to locations where they would be protected by existing mystical safeguards. The temple's presence had created a natural sanctuary where such powerful objects could rest without posing a threat to the surrounding population, its protective emanations keeping the mirror fragments stable and contained. The Master Sword's continued vigilance despite the temple's physical decay demonstrated the weapon's eternal commitment to its protective function. Even as vines and moss claimed the chamber walls, even as the carefully maintained architecture gave way to the patient work of root and weather, the sacred blade remained alert and ready to serve the cause of justice. Its consciousness had adapted to the changed circumstances, learning to work with the natural forces that now shared its sanctuary rather than fighting against them. The connection between the temple, ruins, and the Twilight Realm through ancient magical pathways revealed layers of mystical architecture that had remained hidden during the temple's active period. These connections, dormant for centuries, had been reactivated by the presence of the mirror fragments and the opening of passages between realms. The temple's builders had incorporated these pathways into their design as emergency measures, backup systems that would only activate under specific conditions of dire need. The Skull Kid's guardianship of the sacred grove represented a fascinating example of how magical beings adapted to changing circumstances while maintaining their essential purpose. This enigmatic entity, neither fully alive nor completely spirit, had taken upon itself the responsibility of protecting the temple from those who might seek to exploit its power for selfish ends. The Skull Kid's presence served as both warning and test, challenging visitors to demonstrate their worthiness before allowing them to approach the temple itself. The erosion of time had affected the temple's physical structure in ways that revealed hidden aspects of its original construction. As mortar crumbled and stones shifted, previously concealed chambers and passages became accessible, offering glimpses into purposes and functions that had been deliberately hidden from casual observation. These discoveries suggested that the temple's builders had incorporated multiple layers of secrecy into their design, with different levels of knowledge available to those who demonstrated increasing degrees of worthiness and understanding. The persistence of sacred energy within the ruins, despite their physical deterioration, provided compelling evidence for the theory that spiritual forces operated according to different laws than physical matter. While the temple's walls showed clear signs of age and weather damage, the mystical emanations that flowed through the structure remained as strong as ever, suggesting that the building's true purpose transcended its material form. This discovery had profound implications for understanding the relationship between physical and spiritual reality. The temple's influence on the surrounding forest extended beyond mere protection to active cultivation of mystical properties in the plant and animal life that made their homes within the sacred grove. Trees that grew within the temple's sphere of influence developed unusual characteristics, their wood becoming naturally resistant to corruption, while their leaves exhibited properties that could enhance magical rituals. The creatures that lived among these mystical trees also showed signs of adaptation to the temple's presence. The role of the temple as a beacon for those touched by destiny continued even in its ruined state, drawing heroes and guardians across vast distances through means that operated below the threshold of conscious awareness. The new Link's arrival at the ruins was not accidental, but rather the result of spiritual forces that had been guiding his steps since childhood, preparing him for the moment when he would need to claim the tools and knowledge necessary to face the challenges of his particular age. The preservation of ancient knowledge within the temple's mystical architecture ensured that crucial information would remain available to future heroes regardless of changes in political systems, religious institutions, or scholarly traditions. This knowledge was encoded not just in written form, but in the very stones and timbers of the structure, accessible to those who possessed the spiritual sensitivity to perceive its deeper meanings. The temple had become a living library where wisdom could survive the rise and fall of civilizations. As the ruins settled into their role as a bridge between past and future, between legend and reality, the Temple of Time continued to serve its eternal purpose of protecting and guiding those who stood against the darkness. The physical decay that had claimed its outer form had revealed inner truths about the nature of endurance and the power of purpose to transcend material limitations, ensuring that the temple's most important functions would continue regardless of the changes that time might bring to its external appearance. The influence of the Temple of Time extended far beyond its physical manifestation in any single era or location, its essential nature rippling through the fabric of reality to inspire and guide the construction of similar sacred structures across multiple timelines and dimensions. Each incarnation of the temple, whether built as direct reconstruction or spiritual successor, carried within its architecture the fundamental principles that had been established in those first ancient days when sages and heroes worked together to create a bridge between mortal and divine realms. In timelines where the original temple had been destroyed or lost to the ravages of war and time, new structures arose that bore unmistakable resemblance to the archetypal design established by Rauru and his fellow builders. These temples appeared in locations that possessed similar mystical properties to the original site, places where the boundaries between realms were naturally thin and where the flow of spiritual energy created conditions suitable for miraculous works. The builders of these successor temples often claimed divine inspiration for their designs, describing visions and dreams that guided their hands in recreating architectural elements they had never seen but somehow knew with perfect clarity. The Master Sword's various resting places throughout the sprawling tapestry of Hyrule's history revealed a pattern of sacred sites that formed a network of protection spanning both space and time. Each location where the blade had been placed for safekeeping developed characteristics that echoed the original Temple of Time, as if the sword's presence naturally shaped its environment to conform to the archetypal pattern of sanctuary and testing ground. These sites became pilgrimage destinations for those who sought to understand the deeper mysteries of heroism and divine purpose. The recurring motifs of prophecy and heroism that appeared in legends and sacred texts across multiple cultures and eras suggested a fundamental template that transcended individual civilizations and their particular mythologies. The hero's journey, with its pattern of calling, trials, transformation, and ultimate triumph over darkness, appeared in forms adapted to each culture's unique understanding of virtue and cosmic purpose. The Temple of Time served as the constant architectural expression of this universal pattern, its chambers and passages designed to facilitate each stage of the hero's spiritual development. The temple's architectural influence on other sacred sites could be observed in the widespread adoption of specific design elements that had first appeared in the original structure. The triadic symbolism that referenced the three aspects of the Triforce became a standard feature of religious architecture throughout Hyrule, while the integration of temporal manipulation devices into temple design spread to sites that had no direct connection to the original builders. These influences suggested that the temple's design principles had achieved a level of spiritual authority that transcended ordinary architectural tradition. The preservation of ancient knowledge through stone and song represented a sophisticated understanding of how information could be transmitted across generations without relying on fragile written records or oral traditions that might be corrupted over time. The temple's builders had encoded their most crucial wisdom in forms that could survive the rise and fall of civilizations, embedding prophecies and instructions in architectural elements that would remain readable to those who possessed the proper keys to their interpretation. The role of music in activating temple mechanisms revealed deep connections between harmonic principles and the fundamental forces that governed both physical and spiritual reality. The songs that served as keys to the temple's mysteries were not arbitrary melodies, but rather mathematical expressions of cosmic law, their frequencies calculated to resonate with the mystical energies that flowed through the structure. This understanding of music as applied metaphysics influenced the development of bardic traditions and scholarly disciplines that studied the relationship between sound and spirit. The significance of the Triforce symbol throughout the temple's design went beyond mere decoration to represent a fundamental organizing principle that governed the structure's mystical architecture. Every major element of the building's design was arranged according to triangular patterns that reflected the perfect balance of power, wisdom, and courage that the Triforce embodied. This symbolism served both as reminder and instruction, teaching visitors about the essential nature of divine authority, while simultaneously preparing them to understand their own relationship to these cosmic forces. The temple's connection to the royal family of Hyrule created a bloodline tradition that bound the kingdom's rulers to their role as guardians of the sacred realm and protectors of the mystical artifacts housed within the temple's chambers. This connection was not merely ceremonial, but represented a genuine mystical bond that enhanced the ruler's ability to perceive and respond to threats against the spiritual foundations of their realm. The succession of monarchs who bore this responsibility carried within their lineage the accumulated wisdom of generations of sacred kingship. The eternal watch maintained by the sages and their successors represented a form of institutional memory that transcended individual lifespans and political changes, ensuring that the temple's true purpose would never be forgotten, even during eras when its significance was not widely understood. These guardians developed sophisticated methods of preserving and transmitting their knowledge, creating hidden schools and secret societies that could maintain their vigil, regardless of external circumstances. The temple's function as a bridge between past, present, and future was most clearly expressed in its role as a repository for prophetic knowledge that could guide decision-making across multiple generations. The visions and revelations recorded within its chambers provided a form of strategic intelligence that helped ensure that crucial preparations could be made for threats that might not manifest for centuries. This prophetic function required guardians who possessed not only mystical sensitivity, but also the wisdom to interpret symbolic visions and the courage to act upon knowledge that others might dismiss as fantasy. The continuing cycle of heroism and darkness that played out across the ages found its most perfect expression in the temple's architecture, which was designed to serve both as fortress against corruption and launching point for those called to fight against it. The building's dual nature reflected the fundamental truth that the greatest victories over darkness were achieved not through passive resistance, but through active engagement, requiring heroes who were willing to leave the safety of sanctuary to confront evil in whatever form it might take. The mystical resonance between different incarnations of the temple across multiple timelines created a network of spiritual communication that allowed knowledge and power to flow between eras and dimensions. Heroes and sages working in one timeline could draw upon the accumulated wisdom of their counterparts in parallel realities, while threats that emerged in one timeline could be anticipated and prepared for in others. This cross-temporal connection transformed the temple from a single building into a cosmic institution. The preservation of heroic virtue as an eternal principle rather than merely a personal quality of individual heroes ensured that the courage and wisdom needed to face cosmic threats would always be available when circumstances demanded their manifestation. The temple served as both incubator and launching platform for this virtue, its mystical properties helping to awaken heroic potential in those who possessed the necessary spiritual qualifications, while providing them with the tools and knowledge they would need to fulfill their cosmic purpose. The architectural legacy of the Temple of Time extended beyond its direct influence on religious buildings to encompass secular structures that incorporated elements of its mystical design principles. Castles and fortresses built by rulers who understood the temple's significance often included chambers and passages that echoed its archetypal patterns, creating networks of protection that extended the temple's influence throughout the kingdom's major population centers. The scholarly traditions that developed around the study of the temple's mysteries created bodies of knowledge that influenced fields ranging from architecture and engineering to theology and mystical practice. Universities and academies established departments dedicated to understanding the principles that governed the temple's construction and operation, while secret societies preserved more dangerous knowledge that could only be safely shared among proven initiates. The economic impact of pilgrimage to the temple and its successor sites created trade networks that connected distant regions and cultures, facilitating the exchange of ideas and technologies that might otherwise have remained isolated. These pilgrim routes became corridors of cultural transmission that helped spread the temple's influence far beyond its immediate geographical vicinity, creating a civilization-wide understanding of the principles it embodied. The diplomatic significance of the temple as a neutral meeting ground, where conflicts could be resolved through appeal to higher principles rather than force of arms, created precedents for international law and treaty-making that influenced political development across multiple kingdoms and eras. The temple's role as arbitrator of disputes between temporal powers helped establish the principle that some authorities transcended mere political convenience. as the great wheel of time continued its eternal revolution, carrying each age through its appointed cycles of growth and decline, conflict and resolution. The Temple of Time remained the one constant that connected all eras in common purpose and shared understanding. Its influence had become so thoroughly woven into the fabric of Hyrulean civilization that its principles continued to guide and protect the kingdom, even during periods when the temple itself was forgotten or reduced to ruins, proving that the greatest achievements of the spirit could transcend any limitation that mere matter might impose upon their eternal mission. As we reach the end of our journey through the ages that have witnessed the Temple of Time's eternal vigil, we find ourselves contemplating not just the history of a single structure, but the profound truth that some things transcend the ordinary limitations of time and space to achieve a form of immortality that no force in the universe can diminish. The temple's story is ultimately our own story, a reflection of the human spirit's endless capacity to create meaning and purpose from the raw materials of existence, to build something lasting and beautiful even in the face of inevitable change and loss. The wisdom held within the temple's ancient stones speaks to truths that extend far beyond the specific legends and prophecies of Hyrule, touching upon universal principles that resonate in the deepest chambers of every seeking heart. These are lessons about courage that goes beyond mere physical bravery to encompass the willingness to face the unknown with open hearts and clear minds, about wisdom that transcends mere knowledge to embrace understanding of our place in the vast tapestry of existence, about power that serves not the ego, but the greater good of all creation. The peace that emanates from understanding the cyclical nature of time offers comfort to those who struggle with the apparent randomness and cruelty that sometimes seem to dominate worldly affairs. The temple's eternal presence reminds us that individual victories and defeats, while meaningful in their immediate context, are part of larger patterns that unfold across scales too vast for mortal comprehension. This perspective does not diminish the importance of our choices and actions, but rather places them within a framework that gives them deeper significance and lasting value. The comfort found in knowing that some things endure beyond mortal concerns provides an anchor of stability in a world where everything seems subject to constant change and eventual dissolution. The temple stands as proof that dedication to noble purposes can create works that outlast their creators, that the highest aspirations of the human spirit can be given permanent form through the marriage of vision and craftsmanship, wisdom and will. This endurance is not mere stubbornness or resistance to change, but rather the natural consequence of alignment with principles that are themselves eternal. The temple's role as symbol of hope that transcends individual struggles offers solace to those who feel overwhelmed by the magnitude of the challenges they face in their own lives. Just as the heroes of legend found strength and guidance within the temple's sacred chambers, we too can draw upon the accumulated wisdom of those who have faced darkness and emerged victorious. The temple reminds us that we are not alone in our struggles, that we are part of a great chain of being that stretches back to the beginning of time and forward to its ultimate fulfillment. The eternal nature of the three principles embodied in the Triforce, courage, wisdom, and power, speaks to fundamental aspects of human experience that remain constant despite the endless variations in their particular manifestations. These are not merely abstract concepts, but living forces that shape our daily lives and long-term destinies, qualities that can be cultivated and strengthened through practice and dedication. The temple's architecture serves as a reminder that these principles work best when held in perfect balance, each tempering and enhancing the others. The gentle closing thoughts about rest and the passage of time offer permission to release the anxieties and struggles that weigh upon the spirit, to trust in the larger patterns that govern existence even when we cannot perceive their ultimate direction. Like the heroes who found sanctuary within the temple's protective walls, we too can find moments of peace and restoration that prepare us for whatever challenges await in the world beyond. This rest is not escape from responsibility, but rather the renewal that makes continued service possible. The final meditation on the temple's eternal vigil over Hyrule extends an invitation to participate in that same protective awareness, to become guardians in our own right of the values and principles that the temple represents. This guardianship does not require supernatural powers or legendary weapons, but rather the simple commitment to embody in our daily lives the virtues that the temple celebrates and preserves. Through such dedication, each of us becomes a living temple, a vessel for the forces of light in a world that too often seems dominated by shadow. The invitation to sleep peacefully under the protection of ancient wisdom acknowledges the deep human need for security and belonging, the comfort that comes from knowing we are held within a web of care that extends far beyond our immediate family and community. The temple's protective influence represents the accumulated love and sacrifice of countless generations who have dedicated their lives to ensuring that future ages would inherit a world where hope remains possible and goodness can flourish. As consciousness gently releases its hold on the concerns and complications of waking life, as the mind settles into the rhythms of rest and renewal, we can carry with us the knowledge that we are part of something far greater and more enduring than our individual existence. The Temple of Time stands watch through all the hours of darkness, its presence a guarantee that dawn will always come, that the forces of creation and compassion will ultimately prevail over those that seek only destruction and despair. In this knowledge, we find the peace that surpasses understanding, the rest that restores not just the body but the soul itself, preparing us to wake refreshed and ready to take our own place in the eternal story of light, triumphing over darkness, love conquering fear, and hope enduring through all the turning of the ages.